I want to talk about why the Pokemon franchise is the way that it is today. This is part 2, where I will go into how the games are developed and how making the games affect the rest of the franchise and vice versa. If you missed part 1, where I talked about my thoughts on Scarlet and Violet, click the iCard in the top right corner of the screen to get caught up on the whole discussion. I think that both videos complement each other and should be watched in tandem. And while you're at it, feel free to leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel, and we'd love to share what we like to an even bigger audience. Okay, let's talk about the Q-Fins in the room. Since the release of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, I've had these thoughts in the back of my mind. A lot of these thoughts started showing up after the release of Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Look, I love the Pokemon franchise wholeheartedly. I absolutely love the games, as imperfect as they are. The anime has been with me since childhood. I enjoy playing the card game, and I think it's very apparent how much I like the manga. But despite that, it's time I share my thoughts on the current state of the Pokemon franchise. I aim to talk about the state of the video games and how they got there. I won't give a solution because, spoiler alert, I don't know one. My main goal is to more so inform about the situation rather than to say how I would fix it. This video will almost undoubtedly become more of a scripted ramble. I have a lot of thoughts on the subject and some information that I have scavenged from the internet. The Pokemon Company is pretty tight-lipped about most information regarding the series, so it can be a bit hard to confidently state my thoughts without facts to back them up, but I will do my best. You will know for sure when I'm just theorizing and when I have facts that I am showing. I'll even put indicators on the screen to show when I'm giving my theories with some context to back them up, and straight facts. So without further ado, Pokemon. As we all know, the Pokemon games were created and developed by Game Freak. They are mainly known for the Pokemon games, but they have made a number of other games as well. Game Freak has 2 teams that develop games, and based on the credits of their various games, many of their employees will rotate to and from whatever games are currently being made. It would seem that the team that develops the Pokemon games is larger because they create not only the generational starter game, but also the upgraded versions and nowadays DLC. Of course, this is speculation, and I don't have any confirmation for this other than just looking at credits of their games, and the Pokemon games typically have more names in their credits than the non-Pokemon games. Since the release of Pokemon Sword and Shield and Little Town Hero, Game Freak hadn't developed a non-Pokemon game until their recent port of Pocket Card Jockey to mobile devices. This leads me to believe that the team that would usually be making a non-Pokemon game were the ones to develop Pokemon Legends Arceus. Once again, this is speculation, but it makes logical sense. And why is any of this important? Well, I feel that it's important to know who is working on these games, as well as their experience doing their jobs. I think that knowing this will help us understand why the games are made as they are. This isn't meant to be a way to point out who may be the problem, quite the opposite. I bring up this information to praise the people who essentially had been given an impossible task. The task of keeping Pokemon games releasing with the difficulties that modern game development brings. With so much overlap of the employees between the games produced at Game Freak, we will focus on the directors of each game instead of the whole team. Since many of people's complaints started around the release of X and Y, we will look at those games and their successors rather than the prior games. X and Y was directed by Junichi Masuda, who had directed each generational starter game since Ruby and Sapphire. Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire were directed by Shigeru Omori. Omori went on to take over from Masuda as the main director of the series from Sun and Moon on. Kazumusa Iwao became the director of the side-released main series Pokemon games like Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon and Legends Arceus. Meanwhile, Masuda directed the Let's Go games before moving to a more managerial role at the Pokemon Company proper. Because Omori was working on Scarlet and Violet and Iwao was working on Legends Arceus, someone else had to direct the Sword and Shield DLC. This was Hiroyuki Tani. Going under the assumption that Tani was also directing the DLC for Scarlet and Violet, this would indicate that Game Freak has 3 lead directors for the Pokemon games now, something that really hadn't ever been done in the series' history. Before, it was just Masuda, and now there are at the very least 2 lead directors, but most likely 3 that can all work on the different aspects of the series. Omori leading the start of each generation, Iwao heading up the mid-generational games, and Tani presumably doing the DLC. This is definitely a good thing for the series going forward. It just took a handful of years for them all to get settled into their respective roles. Game Freak seems to be set in having a 3-year development cycle with their games for most of the series, with some deviations here and there. I'll say right at the start before diving into it, I think that they need to adjust this cycle. It takes a much longer time to make games than it ever used to, and I think that Game Freak should probably adjust to that time it takes. That said, I don't think that this would fix all of the problems. I honestly don't know or really believe that extending the development time would really fix all that much in the series, but it probably wouldn't hurt. Anyhow, let's break down this 3-year cycle using Game Freak's own presentation at CEDEC 2022. This image shows that development of Pokemon Legends Arceus started in the fall of 2018, around the release of Pokemon Let's Go, and that Pokemon Scarlet and Violet's development started shortly afterward, presumably after the release of Sword and Shield. In fact, I'd even go as far as to say that as soon as development was wrapped up from the prior games, that they'd start to work on the next ones. They stated on their own website that that's how it was for Sword and Shield. This same article also makes me think that the first year or so of development is used for the overall planning of the game, and the next 2 years are used for the full-on development of the game, giving us the 3-year cycle. It's pretty simple, and honestly seemed to work like a well-oiled machine, until it didn't. I don't quite know why or what happened. I think it's safe to assume that COVID was a factor in it, but I'm sure it goes deeper. Many people's first thought is just to delay the game, and that it should solve the problems. And while that may work for some other companies and games, it isn't always that simple, especially with the Pokemon franchise. Many people also blame the other aspects of the Pokemon franchise as part of the reason that the games have been lackluster as of late. And while the rest of the franchise does indeed have some influence on the games, I don't believe it is as much as other people think. And this comes from how much confidence the Pokemon company puts into the games themselves. They use the games to sell the rest of the franchise, because without the games, they wouldn't have the rest of the franchise. I believe that the Pokemon company prefers that the way people first interact with new Pokemon is through the video games. So before any other part of the franchise can get going, the next generation of games has to come first. Realistically, that's how most franchises work. They want people to get introduced to their new thing in a specific way before the rest of their new thing takes over. Take the Halo franchise as an example. Leading up to the launch of Halo Infinite, deals were made with various other companies to get certain promotions to line up with the game's release. Things like Master Chief appearing on Mountain Dew and Doritos, countless action figures, toys, and the more were ready to be on shelves for the release of the game. But as we know, the game was delayed a year. The promotional deals couldn't just not be released though. These companies still had to make their money, so they went ahead and released their products promoting a game that hadn't even been released yet. I imagine that Pokemon is very much so in the same boat, with some leeway here and there. This leads many people to say that the anime, merchandise, etc. is what's forcing Game Freak's hand to release Pokemon games as fast as they do. While this is wrong, it does have some merit. Game Freak isn't bound by the other aspects of the Pokemon franchise when it comes to developing their games. According to Joe Merrick, the webmaster of the Pokemon fan database Cerebi, Game Freak states the date they intend to release a game, after working with Nintendo, etc. to prevent clashes. The Pokemon company brings all other elements of the franchise to work to that date. Once you get to a certain point, then delays become a nightmare. So Game Freak makes the games at the pace that they set, and the rest of the franchise follows suit. If this is the case, then why can't they delay the games along with the rest of the franchise? They've done it before with Gold, Silver, and Diamond and Pearl, where the anime even got non-canon arcs that didn't follow the games. So then why couldn't they delay Scarlet and Violet and just have the Journeys anime keep on going? Well, and this is just speculation, I think that they may have just misjudged the timing of everything. Game Freak could have felt that they were on pace for release in 2022, up until a point of no return. I'm not a game developer, nor am I a businessman, so I wouldn't know when that point of no return would have been. Maybe they honestly believe that they could have gotten the games done by their scheduled release date, and so they pushed forward with everything else in the franchise. I have no clue if that was the case, or if they just wanted to get these games out for the year to capitalize on generating revenue via the other aspects of the franchise. Could honestly go either way. So setting up new leadership of your game development company, trying to make even bigger and better games, dealing with the effects of COVID, working with the rest of the franchise as well as outside production companies, and trying to get all this done within a 3-year window, it's no wonder why the franchise started to implode a bit. And I think that this only scratches the surface. I don't have all the information, nor do I understand or know what the problem really is. Just like how we don't know what the problem is, there's no real way for outsiders like us to know what the solution is either. It's easy to say that Game Freak needs more time making games or that they need a larger team to work on the series. I honestly can't believe that the solution is that simple, but there needs to be a solution. And based on context clues like the recent changes in development organization, I'd like to believe that the Pokemon Company and Game Freak are working on a solution. It's clear that they know that they released Scarlet and Violet in an unfinished state. With prior updates fixing some issues and adding seemingly misplaced features and more updates to come, we know that they are trying to rectify the problem. And if the Scarlet and Violet DLC is any indication, it would seem that internally they have been able to make some sort of delay on things, with the summer-themed DLC releasing in the fall. These updates and promises of future updates don't make amends for the fact that Scarlet and Violet were released in an embarrassing state, but they do give me hope for the future. Since Pokemon X and Y, the franchise had started to swell and finally boiled over with the release of Scarlet and Violet. Hopefully Game Freak and the Pokemon Company can pick up the pieces and make the franchise that I love so dearly even better.